Okay, guys, welcome back. Congratulations for getting through your first unit on a podcast in the new flipped classroom. We hope that you guys are liking it so far, and this is our next unit, Unit 8. So what we did in the last unit was we went over classification in general, and now what we're going to do is we're going to kind of start going through each of the kingdoms more specifically. So we're going to start with bacteria, and that's the one we're going to go over in this podcast. So one of the main things about bacteria that we're going to talk about is the structure and function of it, and also how bacteria is also classified as a living thing, right? We talked about how all 6 kingdoms are living things, bacteria included. So we talked real briefly in class about domain, and that domain is even more general of a grouping than kingdoms. Okay, so there's 3 domains of life. The first one is archaea bacteria, archaea, the domain. Those are prokaryotes living in extreme habitats, which we'll talk more what extreme habitats mean. Bacteria, such as cyanobacteria and eubacteria. And then there's also eukarya, which remember that's us. That's the protozoans, that's fungi, that's plants, and it's animals. We count as animals.
Okay guys, here's kingdoms of bacteria. We've got archaeobacteria. These are found in the harsh environments, which include undersea volcanic vents, which are extremely hot, acidic hot springs, and also salty water. Here's just a few pictures of them. You can see all the salt crystals and all the salt here formed on the coast. Here you can see the volcanic vents, which would be extreme environments, mainly geysers like in Yellowstone National Park, things like that. You can see the underwater vents as well.
Okay, and then another kingdom of bacteria is the eubacteria. That's going to be the type of bacteria that we're more familiar with, the bacteria that kind of tends to make us sick. This is called the true bacteria. Most bacteria are in this group, and it includes photosynthetic cyanobacteria. Remember, photosynthetic is the type of bacteria that makes its own food using energy from the sun, and cyanobacteria is a kind of bacteria that does that. You've probably heard cyanobacteria from Finding Nemo. They talk about it a little bit. So here's a couple pictures of what eubacteria looks like. Again, it's a little bit more abstract. The harsh environments, we're showing kind of where that bacteria lives. These are pictures of the actual bacteria themselves that you can see here that were done under a microscope.
Okay, now we're going to move on to characteristics of bacteria. We have bacterial structures. There are microscopic prokaryotes. Remember, prokaryotes are the ones with no nucleus or other membrane-bound organelles. They do contain ribosomes. Remember, ribosomes do synthesize proteins. They do have a single circular chromosome, which is their nucleic acid, their DNA, and they are unicellular.
Okay, so this is what a typical bacterial cell is going to look like, and we'll just go around the organelles here in counterclockwise. So cytoplasm, remember, is just the liquid on the inside of the cell. The pilus here on the outside, these are kind of like little hair-like structures. They tend to kind of sift through some junk to keep it off the bacterial cell. The bacterial flagellum is like the tail of the cell, and it helps move the cell around. The ribosomes make the proteins. The DNA is the genetic material of the cell. You've got the plasma membrane, the cell wall, and the capsule of the cell, which capsule is new. We're going to talk about that in a couple of slides.
All right, these bacterial cells are protected. You can see that it did have a cell wall. Now this is made up of peptidoglycan. They may have a sticky coating called a capsule for attachment to host or other bacteria. This is just a picture of that sticky capsule. You can see how it's sticking to other things, other surfaces, even bacteria or other things are stuck to it.
This gives you an idea of the size of bacteria. So this first slide here on the left, the measurement down here is showing you, this is a photo at 100 micrometers. This, by the way, this is a bacillus cells on the tip of a pin. Bacillus cells would be the bacterial cells. Bacillus is talking about the shape of it, which we'll get into in a second. But this is the tip of a pen All right, and then at 100 micrometers, then it's getting a little bit closer at 20 micrometers right here, and then it's getting much closer at 10 micrometers, and these individual cells right here are the bacillus bacterial cells that you're looking at. All right, so there are a couple different shapes of bacteria that are used to classify them. The first one we were just talking about, bacillus, is a rod-shaped bacterial cell. Coccus is a spherical or round shape, or like a dot. It'll look like a dot to you on the microscope slides. And then there's spirillum, which is like a spiral squiggly shape.
All right, these shapes are actually grouped together as well. So there's diplo, meaning two. So di means two. Strepto, these are actually arranged in chains. And then Staphylo, these are grape-like clusters. We'll see some pictures here in just a minute.
Okay, so this is just showing an idea. So here's one individual bacterial cell. If there's two bunched together or grouped together like that, then it's diplo, and these are round circulars, so they're going to be the diplococcus cells. Down here is showing you what streptococci would look like. Okay, so it's the strain of them, or the strip of them in a solid line, and then cocci because, again, it's the round shape. Okay, staphylococci. Staphylo, remember, is talking about them being in a big bunch. Coccus, remember, is talking about the shape. So the shape is circular, that's the coccus. Staphylo is the grouping of them, which is in a bunch like grapes.
All right, this is just showing you a microscope view of the Diplococcus. You can see they're in pairs of two for Diplococcus still because it is round in shape. This is just Streptococcus. This is what causes strep. You can see strepto means chain-like, and coccus is also still those spherical shaped individual bacteria. We have Staphylococcus. You can see Staphylo, it's in that grape-like cluster, and it's still the spherical shape. We have Bacillus E. coli. Remember, Bacillus is rod-shaped. You can see these are rod-shaped here. You can see some of these are doubled up. We're going to talk about reproduction of bacteria here in just a minute. Streptobacilli, you can see chain-like. Bacillus would be the rod-shaped.
Spirillum, remember, is just going to be like the squiggly lines. So this is just kind of pointing out to you some individual spirillum bacterial cells. And then an actual specific kind of bacteria is a spirochete. And this is what it looks like. And it is spirillum in shape. And then another type is Leptospira. Okay, so this is all of these green squigglies right here. This is all Leptospira bacteria that they're showing. They're also spirillum in shape. Okay, so reproduction of bacteria. How do bacteria reproduce? They actually have two possible ways of reproducing. The first way of reproducing is asexually, and it's by something called binary fission. Binary fission is very similar to mitosis, which we talked about earlier in the year. It happens very rapidly, and all of the new cells that are produced by binary fission are identical clones of the parent cell, just like in mitosis. This is what binary fission is going to look like in bacteria. Very simple, very rapid. You have your bacterial chromosome here. The chromosome is going to be duplicated. So see, you have two right in here. Continued growth of the cell, and then eventually what happens, you can see that the cleavage is starting right here, and then they're going to cleave or break into the division of two separate cells. Down here, the definition, cellular organism copies its genetic information, then splits into two identical daughter cells. There's an example of binary fission of E. coli.
All right, another way bacteria reproduce is sexually by what we call conjugation. This is when two bacteria actually form a tube in order to exchange their genetic material. The new cells are not identical. So here you can see the tube that has formed between the two bacteria cells in order to exchange that genetic information.
Okay, so bacteria has several different effects on humans, okay? It can be beneficial, it can be harmful, or it can have no effect at all. First, we're going to talk about harmful bacteria, which is also considered pathogenic bacteria. Pathogens are disease-producing agents. Pathogenic bacteria is going to cause infections in humans. Okay, so this is the bacteria that makes us sick. An example would be one type of Streptococcus bacteria that causes an infection called strep throat. Other illnesses like diphtheria, salmonella, you've probably heard of in food, and cholera are caused by bacteria.
Okay, antibiotics are used in order to stop these bacterial infections. These drugs do damage the cell walls of the bacteria so that they can no longer grow and reproduce.
There's many strains of bacteria that end up becoming resistant to antibiotics due to natural selection. Remember, we talked about natural selection before, where certain things are chosen for or chosen against based on how well they help you reproduce and survive in your environment. So what that's saying is there's actual strains of bacteria that ultimately end up resistant to these drugs or to these antibiotics because of natural selection. And that's when your doctor has to find a different prescription for you because the old one isn't working. It's very important to finish all of an antibiotic prescription in order to kill all of the bacteria, not just the weak ones. If you stop in the middle, just those weak ones have tended to be killed off, and there are some remaining, those stronger ones. Remember, survival of the fittest. And they then are resistant to that antibiotic, and you won't be able to use it anymore with it working.
Okay, now we do have some beneficial bacteria. There are some decomposers that do break down waste and other dead organisms and return them into the environment. Nitrogen fixers, or you might have heard of nitrogen fixation before, but these are bacteria found in root nodules that take nitrogen from the atmosphere and actually make it into fertilizers in order for these plants to use in order to grow. There's also these beneficial bacteria in our human intestines. We do have E. coli. This lives in our large intestine. Also other animals as well, not just humans. They help break down indigestible fiber and produce vitamin D. Now there's bacteria also used in different foods that we do consume. The production of vinegar, yogurt, cheese, and many other foods do use this bacteria.
Okay, so that's the end of our podcast on bacteria. Make sure if you have any questions that you jot them down in your notes. Remember, you need to be taking notes on your podcast to bring them in and get credit for watching it. So we'll see you in class. Have a good one.